Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is going to be a breakdown of some misunderstandings, inshallah. First and foremost, I want to impress upon people that this is not an attack on anybody, any group, or any person. This is nothing personal. But I felt the need to give some type of breakdown to this conversation, this topic that I'm going to be speaking on today, because I just keep running into individuals and videos of rhetoric about truth in essence, but divine truth. And I have a personal vendetta with misguidance as far as divine truth and about truth in general, because I went through some early hardships in my life, and I have a philosophy. It could be right or wrong, but I believe strictly that if I had a stronger spiritual practice and presence in my life, then I wouldn't have experienced some hardships like going to prison for 9 years. I firmly believe that if I was a better believer when I was younger, grew up in a believing community, that a certain lifestyle would not have been available to me to be able to practice. And this is why I do what I do. This is why I post the stuff that I post on Facebook. This is why I do these videos and live streams, just to try to play my part in putting the truth out there. So this topic is going to be about it's going to be a Bible study to some degree, but more specifically, it's going to be about this whole Hebrew Israelite movement. And I always seem to encounter Hebrew Israelite brothers and even some sisters. And as soon as they see how staunch my practice is as a Muslim, recently I had an experience at a job I was working, and it's not the first time. I left, went and prayed, came back, and the guy was like, "You went on break?" I was like, "No, I went and prayed. I went and made salah." And he's like, "Oh, okay, so you a Sunni?" And soon I was like, "Yeah." And for anybody who don't know, Sunni is a Muslim person that practices the original version of Islam, in short. So as soon as I disclosed that, he started picking and trying to pick my brain. Now I seen him coming around a mile away, so initially I didn't fall for it, but he just kept on, knocking on that door. So I had to open the door, answer the door, and I told him that the conversation was not going to end up the way that he would like for it to end. We cool, and he's a cool dude. We still cool, but we have a strong disagreement, and I'm taking it personal that people are getting a misconception about this, about the truth, about divine revelation, what actually is divine revelation, and people are getting perverted knowledge about Islam. And they seem to want to attack you with it. If a Muslim comes to a person and says to that person, "You know what you practicing, it ain't really this and it ain't really that," then we're an extremist. And I'm not that kind of person. I, for the most part, mind my business, but everybody sees my big beard. I always got a kufi on. Even if I got a wife beater on, I always got a kufi on representing. People feel comfortable for whatever reason. Non-Muslim people feel comfortable to attack you. Now, I haven't experienced anything where people come and say, "Yo, you're a terrorist." I ain't experienced that yet. I put off a strong disposition that I ain't gonna accept that anyway. But people always make little sly comments and say things, or they belie Islam. And there's a lot of perverted knowledge on the internet. People have wrote perverted books with perverted knowledge about Islam, and I'm hearing this stuff. So I've been compelled to clear all this stuff up. So I'm going to speak on the whole Hebrew Israelite movement. I got a breakdown. I got 4 points I'm gonna make. I'm gonna make them as precise as I possibly can. I'm gonna strike straight at the root. The details, like I always say, the details never matter. Let's just strike right at the root of things, and then the branches and even the stalk of the tree, it doesn't even matter anymore because you'd already killed the root. So the first thing I want to expound on is, this is not my opinion. Everybody always says that they're on facts. These are actual facts. How do you determine what an actual fact is? It's like math. It has to add up. It has to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it's 1, 2, 5, or if it's 1, 2, 3, 5, even though it might be 2 numbers missing in the process, and in one instance, and 1 number missing in another instance, it's still imperfect. It does not make sense, and it doesn't add up. True divine revelation, it actually adds up. Like if you look at Islamic history, if you go in any history book, and it can only be termed a history book if it was written in that time period and that time frame, no matter what it was, if it's against what you believe and think, or if it's for what you believe and think, it has to be written in that time place, or it can't represent that history. If you look at Islamic history, if you look at Islamic theology, what we believe, and then look at the biased writings in history, they match up. And Islam is the only religion / way of life, whatever y'all want to words y'all want to use, that is like that. Everything else had tampered and torqued and tweaked the history and the actual revelations themselves. Islam is unique and alone at the top of a mountain as far as that goes. So I'm speaking on the historical facts where if a religion or a belief system says something, it should be able to be backed up in a historical context. If it can't, then you can attack either one. You can attack the historical context, or you can attack the belief system, because they don't match up. And you just have to, that's part of the study, you have to figure out which one is wrong, or if they're both wrong. So I did study before I had access to the internet and Google and YouTube, when you can just, Google and YouTube are great tools to use if you know how to use them. Like if I want to Google what is astrophysics, that's a good search, and I'm gonna get a lot of stuff on that. I'm gonna get a lot of accurate knowledge, because that's one whole science. But if I want to Google, do aliens exist, you're gonna get all types of weird opinions, and you can take your pick at which one you want to believe. So you can get a lot of benefit out of the internet and YouTube and so forth, but you have to have a disposition of truth in your heart and your mind first before these tools become useful for you. So I had a semi-traditional way of studying and learning. I had a scholar who sat in front of me that I learned traditionally from, and I still sit with a couple of scholars that I traditionally learned from. And it's, you know, this knowledge has been passed down all the way from the Prophet himself. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was connected to all of the other prophets, all the way back to Adam, the first man, alayhi salam. So diving straight in, I want everybody to know that I read, before I can Google any of the stuff that I speak on, I read the actual books, not from Islamic sources, from those sources themselves, from those historic sources themselves, from the scholars at that time, biased and unbiased. I read the books first. This is how I can point people in the direction of what to search on the internet, or what could be a possibility as far as what's written on the internet or said on the internet or not, because you actually had the real knowledge before all of this discrepancy has gotten out here. And this is where everybody is getting all of these crazy ideas and belief systems, because it matches up with their opinion, with how they feel. How you feel and the actuality of religion or divine revelation, it won't match up. If it does match up, you're probably wrong, because you are not God, you're not Allah, so you can't think like God and Allah. You're going to think like a human. What you think is correct probably is not correct. What you think is wrong probably is not wrong. And that's in the context of the divine eye. So diving straight in. The first thing I want to mention is the Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters seem to be a bunch of angry ex-Christians. They found out that Christianity was it was unreliable, it was unauthentic. They write about that. They did some studies. They're very studied individuals, and they have discovered that Christianity was a slave / white man's religion, made up, used as a tool to enslave black people. Even the guy said, no, we used to not be able to read the Bible and practice Christianity. That had nothing to do with it being made up. That had to do with they wanted to make sure that we don't become black people don't become educated, so that we could not be slaves anymore. Still kind of is going on today. But it seems that those brothers and sisters are a bunch of angry ex-Christians. So they kept the Bible and they gave Christianity back. The problem with that is the Bible itself has been historically proven to be unauthentic. Bible scholars themselves, you'll find people who will disagree, but that doesn't mean anything. If it's a proof that that there are discrepancies, contradictions, inconsistencies inside of a certain book, we absolutely positively cannot attribute that to God. God is perfect. He does not make mistakes. And a lot of people who follow the Bible say, oh, it was not written by God, it was inspired by God. That's rhetoric. That's playing with word. That's word play. That's all it is. Now, please forgive me if I'm hurting anybody's feelings. And the facts are less important than the feelings. I'm a stern believer in that. But sooner or later, we have to look at the truth. Everybody likes to say hashtag facts. Everybody likes to say that they speak the truth. Everybody likes to say that. But nobody, they're really not dealing with the truth. And the truth of the matter is, when you go, if you can break yourself from what you were told and what you're being told and what everybody is doing, just following the community because everybody's doing it. If you can think outside of the box and get away from that and free your own mind, use your own opinion, use your own brain, you'll see that this was made up. A lot of the stuff that was in the Bible was made up. Some of it probably are the remnants of divine revelation, but we don't know which is which. Which is why the Holy Prophet Muhammad SAW came and the Holy Quran came. It was the cap to all of Revelation. As the Holy Quran said, the people, the book, the Jews and the Christians, they changed the Revelation from its original message. Now, with the Holy Quran saying that, let's not just believe it just because we like the Quran or whatever reason. Let's not just believe it just because it says it. Let's prove it. Now, I'm going to prove to everybody right here, right now, the inauthenticity of the Bible. Now, I'm going to make a point for bringing that up. I'm not just throwing fists or disrespecting my Christian brothers and sisters. It's not my intent. My intent is to expose true knowledge, disclose true knowledge so that we can live in a better condition as a people. If you go to Old Testament, 1 Chronicles 21:1. 1 Chronicles 21:1 says, Satan, it's titled, David Counts His Fighting Men. The first verse says, Satan rose up against Israel. He stirred David up to count the men of Israel. Now, go back to 2 Samuel, the book before. I think that's the book before. Yeah. Kings is before Chronicles. Samuel is before Kings. Go to 2 Samuel chapter 24 verse 1, and it also has the same title, David Counting His Fighting Men. Then it says, the Lord was very angry with Israel. He stirred up David against them. He said, go and count the men of Israel and Judah. Okay, first we got to go to the historical context. Chronicles, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was the biblical scholars say it was written by Israel. Israel was a scribe. We don't know his condition, if he was a scribe, if he wasn't a scribe, if he was a devil, if he was a good person, if he was an angel. We don't know who Ezra is, really. The biblical history just says he was a scribe. Okay, let's say that he was a scribe. So here's his perspective on what happened when David had to count the fighting men of the house of Israel. And he said that Satan inspired David to do so. Okay, when you go to Samuel, some say Samuel was a prophet. Some say we have the Muslims. We have Samuel as a prophet, but not in this context. But some of the biblical scholars say that Samuel was a prophet. Some say that he was just a scribe or a courtsman for a king or a queen at that time. I forget who it was. Might have been David. I forget. But he had a different perspective. He said that God inspired David to count the people of the house of Israel, the fighting people of the house of Israel. Now, which one was it? That's a huge mistake. And how could God make that mistake? How could God confuse himself with the devil? Now, I done heard people always make a million excuses. They say, oh, you can't take it literally. It's figurative. Come on. Cut me a break. Cut yourself a break. Don't play those games with your own self. Now, when I ran into this as a young studying individual, I didn't go there with the whole, you don't take it literally, it's figurative. I didn't go there. I said, well, let me find out the history behind it. Who was Samuel? Who wrote Chronicles? I had to go and find that out. Before I can Google it, I had to go find books. I had to read 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 books to get me to the book that I needed to have that information on both ends. And if you, just like the Bible does say, which is some truth, seeking you shall find. I did find the answer. We don't know. This is why the Bible is not credible. It's not credible whatsoever. And it's not credible because it was constructed by various different authors in about a 400-year time period, maybe more. We don't know. Samuel didn't have these scriptures. The Old Testament, Jesus didn't have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the 13, 14 epistles of Paul. Jesus didn't use that stuff. The disciples didn't use that stuff. It didn't even exist at the time that they were alive. So how can we say that this is revelation? Revelation, that word, it means, the root of that word is to reveal. It is to reveal something. So the idea behind revelation is that God had the truth and he revealed the truth to men. This is what revelation means. So if the Bible is actual revelation, where is the gospel according to Jesus? Where is the actual book that Samuel wrote with his own hand? The Muslims have the Quran according to Muhammad. Well, actually, it's God. God, the one that wrote it, gave it to Muhammad. But we have that actual book that Muhammad used as revelation for that point in that time. We have that book. We don't have different spurs and sects or ideologies of the Holy Quran. There's one Holy Quran. There are different denominations in Islam. A different conversation. But we have the original sources. We do not have the original sources of the Bible, so we cannot rely on it. If you rely on it, I'm sorry, I apologize. May Allah forgive me for saying this, but you are crazy. That's just like saying, I'm going to go and learn from a college. I'm going to go get a college degree from a college that does not have an accreditation. I'm going to go and learn astrophysics from a guy that does not have a degree in astrophysics. That's crazy. That makes no sense. Now, it might be what you want to believe because your grandmother believed it and her generation, her generation, her generation. They were forced to believe it. They didn't have a choice. At first, they weren't allowed to believe anything. When we were free as blacks, then the only thing that we knew to believe after we were broken from Islam, because the majority of people that came were Muslims and pagans, they were not Christians, was Christianity. We knew nothing else. Out of slavery, they hit the reset button inside of our brains. So the first thing that we ran to and that we could hold on to was Christianity, because that's all that we seen. That's why they had the black and the white churches. And none of the history of the people of the black church, none of them went back to Israel or Jerusalem or Ethiopia, if you want to put that in there, and learn from those actual biblical environments, so-called biblical environments, and came back to the United States and taught the African people their true lineage, their true divine lineage in Jerusalem and in Ethiopia and wherever else that we say that we descend from. That didn't happen. We picked the Bible up, we picked the Christianity up because as a byproduct of slavery. That's just the facts. Period. Christianity was never in Africa. Islam was. Muslims, slaves came over here in the transatlantic slave trade. That's documented history. It's in the museum. It's in the White House. That this certain slave, they have one slave, Prince Amir. He was a slave from Western Africa. He memorized the whole entire Holy Quran. They have scribes when he writing down Arabic as a slave. He used to write the Fatiha, our main prayer, in the sand and beaches, and it's documented. You don't have that as far as the Bible. You don't have any slaves that memorized the Bible and was writing it down on stone and writing it down on paper and it's documented and encased inside the museum. You don't have that. It doesn't exist. So where did black people get Christianity from? Where did they get the attachment to the Bible from? We got it from slavery. That's just the hardcore facts. I don't have time to deal with anything other than the facts, because you only live once. And if you don't strive and seek to purify your soul with all your energy, if you do that, then God will reward you with the truth. If you don't, if 90% of your week consists of doing things of the world, and then you got 10% of your life that you're going to give to divine revelation, that's exactly what you're going to get. The majority of you is going to be worldly, and then the little bit of you that is divine, you ain't going to know nothing. You won't know anything. And this is the people who are running the divine community right now inside of our country and possibly the world. People that don't have that true devotion, that true burn. I don't care what a pair of lips say. A pair of lips will tell you anything. But when a person is, ardently this and they ardently that and so on and so forth, and you're a real life studied individual, how can you deny this? And it's not one example. There are more examples of this. The Bible has over 50,000 documented errors and contradictions that scholars, people smarter than me, have found. Grammatical errors, scientific errors, historical errors. That's because the book was written by men that did not have a divine connection to God. Period. If they did have a divine connection to God, it would be a consistent story. Believe it or don't believe it, the story would be consistent. Okay, moving on. I brought that point up as to say that the Bible is inauthentic and an unreliable source is because our Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters quote from the Bible. Just as our Christian brothers and sisters, the heart of their belief is the Bible. And I'm going to use a few verses. We're going to go to Deuteronomy 28. They got a lot of verses that they use, but for the most part, the heart of the Hebrew Israelite movement is confined in Deuteronomy 28. Okay, I got some highlights here. I'll just do a couple. The first one I'm going to give, it says Deuteronomy 28:33. It says, a nation you don't know anything about will eat what you work to produce on your land. The Hebrews say, who is this other than the black people? Because we were slaves, and everything that the black slaves made, the white man took. So this is mean it's talking to us. Okay, let's go to something else. Deuteronomy 28:49 says, the Lord will bring a nation against you from far away. It will come from the ends of the earth. They say, oh yeah, we were over in Africa, minding our business, and here the white man came and enslaved us. They use this verse to trick people into thinking that this is, this is what this is. The last one that I'm going to use as an example, It is Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. The Lord will, Deuteronomy 28:68. The Lord will send you back to Egypt in ships. And it goes on. So they said, who else were on slave ships other than the black people? Okay, let's destroy this real quick and real easy. The biblical scholars have already said that the book of Deuteronomy was attributed to Prophet Moses, peace be on him. Now let's do some math. Moses came, his time period was like in the 14th century BC. And the transatlantic slave trade started in the 15th century AD. Man, that's like 100,000 years or something. I don't know, one of y'all smart people do the math on that. My point is, how in the world are black people who these verses are talking about when this revelation was supposedly given to Moses? If it was given to Moses, it was given to Moses speaking about his time and to his people, which were the Egyptians and the Israelite people at that time. Was Moses black? Probably was black. He probably was, more than likely. Everybody on that side of the earth had color. Does that mean I have Moses' DNA inside of my blood? No, it does not. This was talking about the bondage that the Egyptians had the Hebrew Israelites in. The original Hebrew Israelites at that time period in. You can't claim to be from a nation if you're not from that nation. You cannot say what the Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters say. You have to know who you truly are before you know who the truth is. Well, who am I? You are original Asiatic Hebrew man. No, I'm not. The vast majority of black people on the Western Hemisphere came from Western Africa, which is 100% Muslim. That's 100% Muslim. And then they say, oh no, that was before. I heard a Hebrew Israelite actually tell me this. This is not on all the Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters. But a Hebrew Israelite told me, oh, that was when Muhammad did the crusade in Africa. That's the only reason why it's Muslims there now. They used to be Hebrews. Muhammad never stepped foot in Africa. He never seen Africa. So how could Muhammad did a crusade? As a matter of fact, the crusades never happened in Africa. Get the facts straight. Your belief system must match up with historical context. The crusades happened in Europe. White people killing white people. White Muslims versus white Christians. That was the crusades. Had nothing to do with black folks. Some of the North African people who are Arabs or light-skinned folks, they fought in it a little bit. But for the most part, it was white Muslims versus white Christians. That's what the crusades were. They had nothing to do with Africa. So get the facts straight. So, case in point, you cannot open up this any book of Revelation and formulate your own ideology because it's the way you feel. Yeah, black people, we mad that we were slaves and we still are slaves. I'm mad that I'm black and I descend from slaves and my people were put in bondage and so on and so forth. I am mad about that. But that does not constitute the right for me to make up a belief system to free my people. The only thing that actually truly freed people was Islam. Africa as a continent, the world, Asia, Africa, and Europe were all enslaved by pagans and atheists at the time period when the Muslims came. The true believers that came before Muhammad, they reached out to the Muslims and said, hey, we heard that there was a prophet coming in our scriptures. We think that Muhammad is that prophet. Can you come help us out and save the believing community? 100% fact. The only reason why Christians and Jews can pick up a Bible to this day is because the Muslims saved the believing community. It's documented historical facts. They still have the letters. The Muslims, we still have the letters in our museums and in our historical sites and our religious sites. We still have the letters, the actual letters that Christian and Jewish leaders during the time of the Prophet Muhammad's companions wrote and reached out to the Muslim community to come fight and saved the believers. This is how all those places became Muslims. The Muslims didn't fight the people. The Muslims fought the oppressive governments who were pagan and atheist based. We didn't fight the people. We fought those governments. As a matter of fact, a prominent companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when the Muslims conquered Jerusalem, so-called conquered Jerusalem, now the sword was swung. They showed up. There was a prophecy that the head Christian had in the heart of Jesus' hometown, not his hometown, but where he put in work at, in Jerusalem. The head honcho, the head Christian, he said, he read the scripture, he looked at it, he said, okay, you look like this, you look like that, you look like this, you said this, you said this, you did that. You are that person that's inside of this scripture. And he handed the key over to Umar. They didn't swing a sword. And the Muslims still have this key. In the court, I forgot what it's called, whatever it's called. They got a Jewish, Muslim, Albanian, and Christian court in Jerusalem. They share it because that's the Holy Land. It's one of the Holy Lands. They share it. The Muslims have the keys to it. We didn't fight anybody for it. We still have the contract that Umar wrote with that head priest. I forgot what his name is. It's there if you research it. Google that. If everybody wants to learn from the internet, believe in the internet, Google that. They handed the keys over. The Muslims still have it to this day. Muslims, right now, a Muslim family has the key. They go and open up that church. The reason why we have that church, that key, is because the Christians was fighting each other, and the Muslims were the ones that came and made peace for that. And we were the ones that were the peacemakers. We stopped those Christians and those Jews from fighting against each other, and they gave us the key because we were the peacemakers. We still have that key to this day. And every single morning, a Muslim family wakes up and opens up the head church in Jerusalem. Facts. Google that. YouTube that. So the point is, you can't make up stuff just because you want to believe it, you like to believe it, or somebody that you respect a lot tells you this and they want you to believe it, and you respect that person, so you follow what it is that they believe just because you respect that person, which is what we have a lot going on. I want to give an example of how divine interpretation comes. I'm going to try to make this quick. This is a small overview of hadith. Hadith means tradition. It's a stories, traditional stories. Muslims, we are not allowed to pick up the Quran and just interpret it for ourselves for this reason alone. Because a person can take verses and make them mean what they want them to mean and misguide people, take people off the actual truth of Islam or actual truth of guidance that God sent down here as revelation. This is a part of the criteria to be able to speak on revelation from the Islamic perspective, and really you can judge everything with this criteria. It says that the definition of a Sahih hadith. A Sahih means it's absolutely sound, it's authentic, it's absolutely correct. And hadith, as I told you, it means a story. In this context, it's a story of divine revelation about the Prophet, the Prophet Muhammad, what he did, what he said, what he approved of, disapproved of, so on and so forth. A hadith is authentic.